It's good evening to Nadia Nagamooto in the UK. Welcome to Yellow Shelf.
Hello, welcome. It's Nadia Nagamooto.
Nagamooto. You know
Yes.
what? Sometimes you hedge your bets. Thank you for joining me.
That's okay.
Congratulations, Nadia. Your book came out late last year. Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard, and the title's Beyond Discomfort. Could you tell us all about this book and everything we need to know?
Wow, big question to start with. So, yes, indeed, my book is called Beyond Discomfort, Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard and What You Can Do About It. And it came about through, I suppose, years really of facilitating conversations with leaders globally about topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So typically organizations bring me in, they want to open up a further discussion, really get their leaders talking and exploring about what inclusive leadership means to them. And what I was finding was that leaders were getting stuck, but they were getting stuck for different reasons.
Hmm.
And depending on where they were at, with regards to their understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, it impacted their receptiveness to learning about themselves and about people who were different to them. And it also impacted their willingness to act towards what their organization hoped was an inclusive endeavor. And so there were some limitations on how far these leaders were willing to go based on their understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is where I came up with. So the book essentially is framed around a 2 by 2 model that I came up with, having facilitated these conversations, going, "Do you know what? There are some leaders who really they don't necessarily they're quite closed to exploring to receiving information that goes against their own reality, their own understanding of um also their belief system. For
Yeah.
example, they believe in meritocracy, they believe that the best person gets the job. And when we're talking about equity in particular, the narrative is very much around, well, look, there's a lot of invisible barriers that you might not necessarily be aware of, but if you haven't experienced them because you might fall into some majority characteristics where the world was designed for people like you, the organization was designed for people like you, that there's a bias in the system that it might not necessarily be that the best person gets the job. And so there's this, what I call in my book, a disconcerted leader who feels like the world is turning against them. The pendulum has swung too far in the opposite direction, and quite honestly, um, is has that fear of acknowledging their own privilege, has a fear of delving into that. Well, what is it? What if it's true? What if it is true that doors were open for me, but it was closed for other people? What does that say about my worth, my value? I've always thought that I have earned my successes, and you're now telling me that not everything I earned um, was down to me and my talent alone. So I call that a disconcerted way of being. And bearing in mind that across the 4 ways of being, so I have proof-seeking leaders, I have those with a cheerleading way of being, and I have those who are leading beyond discomfort. And across all the 4 quadrants in the model, there is no right or wrong. I'm not condemning people for being, a certain way of seeing the world in a certain way. We all
Yeah.
experience the world differently. We see the world differently. The point of writing the book was to say, actually, our responsibility as leaders, wherever you are in as a leader, whether you're an organizational leader, whether you're a political leader, wherever, whatever leader you are, our responsibility is to really understand why we're experiencing the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings that we're having, and how that translates into our behaviors and the outcomes that, the subsequent outcomes of those behaviors. And because I felt that leaders were quite quick to potentially shut down on
Yeah.
diversity and inclusion, we've seen this globally, the pushback against diversity, equity, and
Mm.
inclusion work, but not necessarily willing to delve into what emotions underpin that? Where is that coming from? There's a defensive. What we see in the pushback is anger, is frustration, is, a condemning of all things diversity, equity, inclusion. But really, what's going on there? What's the discomfort? What's the
Mm,
fear? What's the other emotion? There's something going on that means that whatever change you're foreseeing, diversity, equity, and inclusion work is going to lead to, you're not, that's not something that you want. What do you fear that you're going
yeah.
to lose as a result?
Yes.
So, and that's the book is a self-reflection tool, ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. And I love it because, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about the book was because, I have a background in this space as well. I know DE and I can be incredibly emotive. And like you said, for all those reasons of our ingrained beliefs and our ingrained values and the way we were
Yeah,
raised and what we were exposed to. And it's really powerful because it is uncomfortable. And the top, your title, Beyond Discomfort, yeah, it just resonates so true that, yeah, we
mm,
have to kind of get beyond that discomfort of the work that needs to be done.
yeah. And it's deep psychological
Yeah,
work, you know. Like
yeah,
we're both psychologists, so we
yes,
kind of get I'm talking to a fellow psychologist, so I think that so often that as leaders, um, we don't dedicate the time to self-reflection, to understanding what's going on for me. Why did I respond in that way when that person said something? Or why is it that that particular person activates me in a way that no one else does,
yeah,
and I don't and the same thing when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives or things that are going on in the organizational world. It might be positive action programs, sponsorship programs, whatever it is, so to support a particular demographic of individual. What is what what is it that triggers or activates someone that
mm,
means that they're they're feeling like maybe they're excluded. They're
yeah,
feeling like they're losing their own power or control
yes,
over what's happened in their life today. There's something that they're losing out on. If others are gaining something, for example, access to a program when they're not.
yeah, yeah,
So, but it's important. And what leaders often don't do is quite easy on the surface level to go, well, there's a program for women, there's not one for men.
yeah,
What they're not necessarily willing to do is really examine historically, like go way, way, way back, like historically, what's the, um, how has the world received men in comparison to women?
yeah,
And if they really analyze it and understand through that lens how the world perceives them
mm,
compared to other genders,
yes,
then they'll get a sense of this equity. But if they're not willing to delve into that, we're not willing to open up to
mm,
that different reality that other people have experienced, but they haven't, then it's unsurprising that they feel that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is unfair.
yeah. And Nadia, what I love about the book is you deliver real stories, like real journey stories that you've experienced it throughout your career. You talk about
Yeah.
real actionable solutions to create change. So I'm wondering, at what point did you decide to write the book? I'm really interested in that. I'd love you to share that.
Mm.
And yeah, tell us anything we need to know about you. You also host a podcast, so I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I why So the book came about because I could see that there was a lot of how to be an inclusive leader. So the skills. There was a
Yeah,
lot about behavior. Like
yeah,
this is what you need. You need to be open-minded. You need to be curious. You need to,
sure.
there's lots of inclusive leadership development courses or training programs and what have you. And I was thinking, do you know what? From a psychological perspective, you can train someone, you can tell someone what they need to know.
Mm,
But unless they've got the motive, we know this, right? Unless they're motivated,
yeah,
unless they understand why they're doing it and have dedicated the time to understand themselves and how, especially when it comes to DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work, it's so complex because how I, for example, have lived my life, the how what I have experienced personally because of my diversity characteristics, because I'm first generation UK born, because I'm a woman, because I'm a British Mauritian, because I come from a lower socioeconomic background, because it's very different. My lens of the world is different to you, right? So we share some similarities in our diversity characteristics, I'm sure, but nevertheless, I can't understand you fully if you're my direct report, for example, just as much as you can't understand me fully if I'm your manager, unless we open up and we share and we want to understand each other. And often what happens is that leaders aren't willing, that they want, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. But inclusive leadership is something that you lead with heart, not head.
Yes.
And so heart means understanding yourself, understanding each other, understanding how other people experience the world and the emotions that
Mm.
sit with it. And that fundamentally, that's what's, I suppose, what's unique about this book.
Yeah.
There's many books on inclusive leadership, but I hope that people gain something from this with regards to that sort of deeper sense of self by the time they finish reading it. Um, so yes, that's the book. That's why it came about. It was an interesting writing process simply because, I've got two young children. So there's this kind of like, where do I find? I've got a full-time job.
Yeah.
I got my own consulting, company. So it was sort of writing on a Friday. So literally carving out that day, not answering any emails, just shutting myself off from the
Wow.
world whilst I write, and then waking up at like 5 a.m. on a Saturday and a Sunday morning to write a few hours before the kids woke up. And that's what I
Wow.
kind of just blitzed
Yeah.
it. A woman on a mission. So, but it's been so well received. And,
Yeah.
the podcast you were asking about, why care,
Yeah.
it's been an absolute, I can't tell you how much having conversations with
Mm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion thought leaders globally, how much that's facilitated my own thinking and hearing other people's stories,
Yeah.
hearing other people's thought leadership, their perspective from where they sit in the world
Yeah.
or their industry. Um, Having a podcast at show is an absolute privilege because I learn so much from these incredible people. I am honored to have such amazing guests. They
Yeah.
are people who, some of them pretty high profile
Mm.
in terms of, sharing their stories, personal stories of how the world has received them because of who they are, some of their diversity
Mm.
characteristics, through to authors, through to yeah, real thought leaders in the space who are sort of pushing boundaries. And I mean, coming to the end of the fifth season, so there's been
Wow.
like over 50 episodes now. I typically do 10 a year,
Yes.
and I go for quality rather than quantity. For
Yeah.
me, that's I get like,
Yes.
I'm very particular on my guests,
Good.
and it's precious.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I care.
Fabulous. And so, along with the book, I'd recommend anyone to take a listen to the podcast. And look, I'd love to have you back at another point that we could talk specifically about the podcast, because I think that's worth sharing in itself with the Yellow Shelf audience. Nadia, just
Thank
finally,
you.
how do we connect with you if we're curious about the book? I know you've got a website. I've seen your book on Amazon and on all those platforms, but you tell us,
Yeah,
how do we connect?
absolutely. So on social platforms, I'm on LinkedIn. So you just type in Nadia Nagamooto. There's only one of me as far as I have found in the world. That's very handy to have a unique surname.
Yes.
I'm on Instagram, so at Nadia Nagamooto. And yeah, I've actually got three websites now. So from a consulting perspective, it's avenirconsultingservices.com.
Yep.
My personal website is nadianagamooto.com.
Yes.
And the book, it actually features on my website. And if you click on the book within my website page, it takes you to the Beyond Discomfort website, and that's got loads of.
Yeah.
I wanted to make things accessible, so there's like a free survey you can take. No, it's like data's not being collected; it's just completely anonymous. It's just for people to use. I don't, I'm not taking anyone's data. There's a workbook. There's a Beyond Discomfort community. So we've got a Slack channel where we're having conversations, and I'm
Yeah.
wanting to build that up this year in particular. Last year was like a roller coaster ride when the book got released and the
Yeah.
world just started reading it, and it
Yeah.
was amazing. So now let's carry on the conversation. So that's what 2025 is about.
Yeah, awesome. Well, listen, it's great to be able to share with you in 2025 and get your book out there to the Yellow Shelf audience. I will put
Thank
all
you.
your links in the show notes to make it really easy for anyone
Thank
to
you.
connect. Thank you for joining us. Good luck with the journey of the book, the podcast, and I will reach out to you and have you back on if you're willing to
Oh,
talk about the podcast in the future.
I would absolutely love to. If the audience are willing and wanting the information, then I'm always happy to share. So thank you so much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure, Nadia. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, and you. Thank you.